You have just released legislation that would fully restore the tax deduction for state and local taxes. My question to you is why now when the Senate is fully controlled by Republicans? How far can it get?
Well, the House is controlled by Democrats, and in fact, my colleague in the House, Congressman Bill Pascrell, sitting on the Ways and Means Committee, as I sit on the Senate Finance Committee, have joined together. He's got bipartisan support in the House. I'm looking forward to them being able to send it over to the Senate and have leverage in the Senate as a result of that. I'm glad to see the president says he's open to the consideration of restoring the deductibility of the state and local property taxes, and I think that when 30% of the nation's tax filers use the state and local property tax deduction, and nearly 80% of those filers were under $200,000. This is definitely a middle income class tax issue that I think the president would want to embrace.
Of course, we were just saying there that New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is meeting with Trump. What would you say to President Trump if you're in that meeting with him?
Well, I would say to him, as someone who knows parts of our nation, as he comes from New York, but though it's not exclusive to New York or New Jersey, California, there are 30% of the nation's tax filers. This is the oldest tax deduction in the federal code, established in 1913. And it prohibits, in essence, or it stops double taxation for taxpayers. So it seems to me, I would say to the president, you know that this is a middle income tax cut. You want to appeal to that middle income tax universe. You want to continue to have the viability of the investments in our communities that are so critical, like an infrastructure that the president talks about. On all these items, you should be foursquare with restoring the full deductibility.
Governor Cuomo also blamed the state and local tax deduction change for New York State's drop in revenue, as we mentioned, tax revenue specifically, prompting many residents, particularly the rich, to leave the state. Do you see a direct cause and effect between the SALT tax change and some New Jersey residents, perhaps the wealthier, leaving the state? What are you hearing?
Well, what I'm hearing is not just wealthy individuals, but really middle-class people in New Jersey who are telling me that now, as they begin to file their tax returns, they find themselves having to pay more in federal taxes than they did before. In some cases, some are paying for the first time when they didn't, because the full deductibility isn't a reality. And for many people in New Jersey, that's upwards of $2,500. And so it's a big hit to them, which they did not expect to experience based upon the tax bill as it was described by the Trump administration.
So a surprise there. There's also been surprise for many small business owners, perhaps in your state at the moment, who have been worried about their optimism draining. We're seeing it in the numbers today, the data coming from the US, because of the shutdown that was affecting them. We are now getting very close to potentially another shutdown. How optimistic or pessimistic are you about avoiding that scenario?
Well, we should have never had the first shutdown. It wasn't necessary. There was a bipartisan vote, total unanimous vote in December of last year. It's the president who changed the dynamics of that, insisting on $5 and then $5.7 billion for his wall. There is a bipartisan agreement. I just left our caucus. There is a bipartisan agreement now that will put nearly $3 billion all told towards homeland security and the elements of border security. So the president should just accept victory and move on to some degree, and so I hope he will. If he decides to shut down the government over his insistence on something that he told us all as Americans that Mexico is going to pay for, he should have come to understand that Americans are not going to pay for this war. We will put more border security in, but at the end of the day, Americans don't want to pay for a wall that's $5 billion, $6 billion down payment towards what ultimately is a $25 billion wall.
You talk about more border security. How much ground should the Democrats give when it comes to reaching some kind of deal on border security by Friday?
Oh, we gave. That's what this bipartisan agreement is about. When you go to nearly combined between the actual border barriers, fencing and whatnot of $1.7 billion 1.3 billion, and 1.7 billion in additional Homeland Security money for technology at our ports of entry, for other elements of Homeland Security along the border. That's a pretty big amount, $3 billion. And so the president should say that I've made a long way here towards where I want to be, and he should accept it. So we've given a great deal from my perspective, and I think he should just accept it. We want to keep the government open. We did so in December when we voted unanimously with Republicans to keep it open. We're willing to do so again now. Only he can shut the government down. That cost us $6 billion in GDP.